Welcome to the Breaking It Down podcast again. I'm your host, Taylor Schrock. Today I got my special guest, Artie Wirth.
What's up, y'all?
Today we'll be breaking down the NFL news as well as diving deeper into the AFC East. Some of the NFL news. How you feeling about preseason, man?
We've watched one game so far. I think Trey Lance looked, from what all I've seen, he looks like someone who can go into the preseason game in his, fourth year. He's playing against rookies. There's not too much that I'm, surprised about. He should have been able to pass for 3 touchdowns, over 200 yards. It's something that it should be expected from a former third overall pick.
Do you think he shot he gets traded for by some of the teams? Like Saints are kind of in the hot cake market. Justin Fields got a contract with the Jets, but that's nothing too stable. Do you think any of those teams can kind of shop, or you think the Chargers are more looking at a solid backup for Herbie?
I think for Trey Lance, I think the biggest benefit for him is that I think he would like consistency when it comes to the coaching, when it comes to facilities, when it comes to overall how he conducts his business. I think he's been on the move a lot recently. He's been with Dallas most recently, and I don't think putting him in a situation with the Saints is going to be any beneficial. It's going to only hurt. The Saints are one of the worst teams in the NFL right now.
Kidding.
They have a terrible roster, top to bottom. Their cap is in a complete mess. They don't know how to sustainably, support their franchise. And as far as the Jets, I don't think there's any concerns for Justin Fields. I think Justin Fields is going to be a solid starter when it comes to being.
You don't worry about the toe injury at all?
Not at all, because I think when you come off a season with Aaron Rodgers and everything that came with that, those past 2 seasons, he only really played in one, but he was a part of the franchise for the last 2. I don't think it's very beneficial for them to go in and rotate through quarterbacks again when they are trying to find a cycle of bringing in a quality starter in the NFL who's won games, who's done it at a really good level before. I think Justin Fields, with the right pieces, with Garrett Wilson around, he's going to be able to, win some games this year.
Yeah, we'll see. No, for sure. I definitely hear you on that part. And he's obviously had his opportunities. He's had limited opportunities. He's only started 16 games as a top 3 overall pick. Part of that was because I think the Brock Purdy kind of upbringing kind of kicked him out a little earlier than he had opportunity to get going, but then he didn't play well at all either. So, but no, I agree with you. Being a back would probably be the best way to learn for him to learn on that part. We got the recent news of Jordan Addison being suspended. Obviously that'll take a little toll off of the Vikings offense with a new quarterback. That'd be nice to have fully reloaded weapons, but when you got Justin Jefferson, you're not too concerned about the Vikings offense from that standpoint. Jefferson's fantasy value will skyrocket having not Addison on their team for the first 3 weeks, but that kind of scary about JJ McCarthy, or you think Jefferson's plenty enough for him to succeed right away?
I think the expectations in Minnesota need to be tempered a little bit. We're dealing with basically a rookie when it comes to JJ McCarthy.
100%.
I think you go from Sam Darnold, and I think last season nobody thought that was going to be the type of season that they were going to have. I think that Sam Darnold was able to make a really good connection, but you also saw some of the flaws towards the end of the season where you saw old Sam Darnold creeping up, and that was all that we talked about throughout the years. When is the old Sam Darnold going to show himself? Because we've seen it time and time again.
And he did it.
And he waited until the end when it really, really mattered. And so that was part of the reason that the Vikings didn't feel comfortable committing to Darnold longer, because they had McCarthy in the building. They felt that they could, trust McCarthy to take this franchise forward. And I think that McCarthy is going to be able to step in. And with a guy like Justin Jefferson, you're going to be able to do some really, really good stuff when you build that connection. And so we'll see what the first 3 weeks look like with building that connection. And then we'll see when Addison gets back, how well and how, much learning JJ has done within those first 3 weeks to, realize that this is the NFL. This isn't Michigan anymore. So this is going to be a challenge for him. And the expectations are going to be high for him just based off of last season and everybody's, perfect season with Minnesota. Everyone's going to hold McCarthy to that same standard, because essentially the Vikings said, we'll pass on Darnold and we'll pass on, trying to do that again, and we'll go with a rookie. So he's going to be held to those expectations of, winning a lot of those games that, you don't want to have a big drop off from Darnold and have the what if factor. What if we kept Darnold? What would have been different,
Yeah, and he has Hawkinson, he has Aaron Jones. They have weapons around him. It's not just Addison's the number one and the only guy who can make the offense click too. So that's really helpful. Rashee Rice, we're still waiting on that response from the court, right? That suspension.
Yeah.
I mean, did he plead guilty?
He pled guilty, so he is currently
comes down to the NFL organization now. Right?
He's been sentenced already, so he's been sentenced to 30 days in
jail time. Right? 3-year
and
parole?
5-year probation. So
Probation, yes.
we'll see kind of what that plays out to be. I mean, he's got 5 years to serve that, time. So I don't know when he's going to be serving that time, if it's going to be during the off season or whatever it may be. But he is going to be serving time for sure. Like, that is a non-negotiable at this point. And I think with the NFL has to really look at this and determine what their policy is when it comes to that sort of behavior. When we have Addison getting suspended for 3 games, it'll be interesting to see what Rashee Rice is being suspended for. I mean, he could be suspended for upwards of the entirety of the season.
Well, I was hearing some people say that the most likely is like a 4 to 6 game suspension.
Yes, correct.
But like I said, that's just what I've been hearing.
It's
from
around
reports.
4 to 6, and there's not going to be a lot more than 4 to 6 weeks, just based on the
Previous
severity
history,
and just having the no priors to this when it comes to the NFL's investigation aspect of that. So it'll be interesting to see what the NFL decides to rule on that.
No, absolutely, perfectly. Yeah, that's most of what I was curious. Short Sanders starting week 1 in preseason. Kind of a headline's been passed around. Other than that, not too much NFL news as of currently. Okay, let's hop into the AFC East divisional breakdown then. We got the Buffalo Bills first on our list. They finished 13-4, got knocked out by the Chiefs in the AFC Conference Championship. Some controversial calls as always, but hey, that's how life flows in the Josh Allen era. Transaction-wise this year, they kind of didn't really improve their team all that much. They released Von Miller, got some defense in the draft. Maxwell Harrison, kind of the big name. They got the cornerback from Kentucky, kind of the big one that they're adding. But other than that, like, the team hasn't improved all that much. I don't know if it really does need to. We see every year that they're always right there. It just comes down to 2 or 3 plays against Mahomes that'll usually turn their season sideways. Or and I think the team is built right. I think it just needs to finish out through for once.
I think the biggest thing is when you talk about the Bills and their playoff, success or lack of when it comes to those big games is, in the NFL right now, you're kind of dealing with the situation of wrong time. I mean, I feel like had Allen been in the NFL a little bit differently or at a different time, I think, it's basically like playing Jordan. Like, when you played Jordan in the NBA, you just knew that you weren't going to win it based on the fact that he was there, and he just dominated the NBA for so long. Mahomes right now is dominating the NFL right now, and you, as any other quarterback, you're just kind of in the NFL right now at the wrong time, just purely based on the fact that Mahomes is the person who runs the show after Brady did it for 24 years.
Yeah, no, not wrong. It's Brady's right. No, but you're definitely right on that part. It'll be interesting to see. I think that there's a real chance that Mahomes can get taken down. I mean, he got taken down last year by Hurts. I mean, not by Hurts, by the Eagles, by Saquon.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So their schedule this year, though, the Bills are pretty. They do have one of the easier schedules, I believe. With week 1, they play the Ravens, which is gonna be a difficult week. I don't know how I feel about that game. I think that could literally go either way. That's his first Sunday night of the season.
First Sunday night or first
Sunday night?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's gonna be just a coin flip. It's at Buffalo, so that's a Bills Mafia game for sure. Hopefully,
yeah, Bills Mafia is going to definitely show out in that game. I think Lamar is going to have this is a prove it season for the Ravens, and they're always consistently in the playoffs, but they're never really able to get over the hump when it comes to finally getting to the the big game, that big one, and just the fact that they've done it for a while. They've been in and out. They have all the weapons and the tools they need to go. They have Henry.
For sure.
They signed Hopkins in the offseason.
They got Flowers still there, Bateman.
Yeah, and so I think right now, and for Harbaugh, like, the time's ticking. Like, he's not going to be the coach forever. And not saying that he's old or anything.
Do you think he's on the hot seat?
No, not at all.
No, I agree
just think that he wants to win, and like, you can't consistently have teams that are so close, but you can't get over the edge, because at that point it comes down to coaching.
No, for sure. Then they play the Jets week 2. That should be an easy rollover win, I think, in my opinion.
I think the Jets are going to surprise some people this season.
You think the Jets are going to surprise some people?
Yes, I think the Jets are going to be able to kind of show everybody that they got a defensive-minded coach in Aaron Glenn. Their defense is going to be a lot better than it has been, and their offense is going to be able to click a little bit better, because they brought over Tanner Edgington from Detroit with Aaron Glenn. He was the former passing game coordinator for the Lions.
He's OC, right?
Yeah, he's going to be the OC in New York. and then he also brought in Steve Wilkes to be the defense coordinator. So it's going to be really, educated staff and also some young, talented staff.
Yeah. Don't ask Niners how they like Steve Wilkes. I know some Niners fans that did not like him as defensive coordinator, but we'll see how he plugs in with Aaron Glenn. Yeah, I'm not too high on the Jets, to be honest. I not a big Justin Fields guy, so we'll see. We'll see. I feel like the Bills should be able to have that game. Then they're at home versus the Dolphins. Can Tua stay healthy? I mean, we'll get to that later on in the show, but that's a big one. Versus the Saints, if they don't win that by 20 points, I don't know what we're doing anymore. I mean, it's the NFL, so it could, surprise upsets happen, but Bills should have no problem. Versus the Patriots, you're gonna argue that one. That's gonna be a tight one, aren't you? I don't hate that though. I think the Patriots could surprise a lot of people this year.
Yeah, I think Mike Vrabel has been able to instill a culture of hard work and effort and discipline when it comes to New England this offseason. I think one of the biggest things that there's the difference is just the tone and the personality of the coach. I think last year one of Gerard Mayo's quotes that blew up over the internet was once they cross over the white lines, there's nothing I can really do for them, or there's nothing any coach can do for them. And then we see yesterday in practice, there's a between the joint practice with the Commanders, there becomes a fight, and Vrabel is literally in the pile with all the other players. He doesn't have pads or helmet, and he comes out with a bloody cheek because he was in there, defending his guys.
Yes,
so there's a difference in New England when you have Mike Vrabel, when you have Stephon Diggs, a proven number one, and then you signed Milton Williams as your big price ticket on the defensive line this offseason. I think the New England Patriots are going to surprise some people, not even with the bias that they're a good team, but with the fact that they have the tools and they have the coaching staff to be one of the most successful teams in the NFL right now. They have 4 former head coaches on their staff.
Yeah.
They have Vrabel, they have McDaniels, they have Thomas Brown, who was the interim with the Chicago Bears last year, and they also have Doug Marrone, the former Jacksonville Jaguars coach. He's currently coaching the offensive line, and I think the offensive line is doing really, really well in camp so far.
Will Campbell,
you're seeing a lot of improvement, and you're seeing some surprises too. Some guys who had the starting job in previously years, they're not running with the ones anymore. They're more or less warming up with the 3s, the 2s. There are younger guys, and there are different guys who are rotating in and out of that first team offense. It's just going to kind of depend on who your best 5 are, and just stick them out there. I think you got one solidified. You got 1 or 2 solidified with Mike Onwenu, who's your highest paid player on your roster annually. He's going to be obviously one of your starters. You got to just kind of figure out where he wants to be. And then you also have Will Campbell, your first round pick. I think he's going to be a lock to be that starting left tackle spot, and we'll see what the other offensive line shakes out. The center is undecided, the guards are undecided, and we'll see. I mean, the Patriots are going to be able to make some noise for sure, though.
So that should be interesting. Week 5 or 6 game right there. And they're at the Falcons, at the Panthers. Could be interesting. I like the Panthers this year versus the Chiefs. That'll be a fun one, November 2nd. CBS afternoon game on Sunday. That'll be a really tight one. That should be a lot of fun to watch. At the Dolphins versus the Buccaneers. At the Texans. At the Steelers versus Bengals. At Patriots. At Browns. Eagles. Jets at home. Finish off the season. I honestly I see another 12-5, 14-3 season coming up. I think their ceiling is the Super Bowl. I think their floor is still the playoffs at this point, probably. How would you feel about that?
Yeah, I think the Buffalo Bills are going to be making the playoffs again. For me personally, I'm never one who likes to go through the schedule at the beginning of the year and say, "Oh, this is when they're going to win here. They're going to win." The circumstances are going to pop up. You're going to lose players. You're going to add players on other sides. So it's never like a good thought process in my mind to go through the schedule and say they're going to be a 14-win team. We'll see how it shakes out. The biggest thing is I want to see what Buffalo looks like weeks 2 through 5, because oftentimes week 1 is proven to be a liar when it comes to a lot of these teams.
Sure,
when you come out the gate, you either win one or lose it in week 1, and then your season is completely different from that first game. And so it'll be interesting to see what the Buffalo Bills come out with. And for me, I think the Buffalo Bills are going to make it to the playoffs, and I think they're going to have a chance to make it all the way because like we talked about with Kansas City, they have had some struggles recently, and I don't think they got any better in the offseason. I think they just
and Kansas City arguably got better because they get Rashee Rice back, they get more experience with Worthy, they get a healthier Hollywood, they got a few more offensive line, like they paid Trey Smith. We'll get to them later on, different episode, but no, Kansas City is not just going to roll over and let anybody take that from them. by any means. But no, right? Yeah, I think the Bills have done some good things. James Cook is coming back after that holdout. He's in camp practicing, so I'm not too worried about him.
Cook isn't. He's at camp, but he's not
He's
practicing.
not. He's not practicing. My bad. My bad.
It's a holding.
He's holding. Yeah, he's holding in, not holding out. But yeah, so we'll see how that goes. I'm assuming he'll play when it comes down to it. But I never like to see guys skip camp. That doesn't always work. Brandon Ayuk did it last year, and it was more injury prone start of the year. That always concerns me. Which if they lose James Cook, that could be a big loss. But as of right now, it's looking okay with him. Why don't we move on to the Patriots? We talked about them a little bit already with you kind of breaking down a lot of their new coaching staff hires and such. Adding Stephon Diggs, I think, is bigger than most people are thinking it's going to be. Adding a veteran to that receiver room, giving Drake May a locked and loaded number one receiver, like day in, day out. You're not worried about him going to fall off. I mean, unless age just hits him all of a sudden, which, I mean, it could. He's 31 years old. He does have that on top of him. Drafted Kyle Williams third round. I really like Kyle Williams' tape. I was a big fan of him coming out of Washington State. And they desperately need a receiver help. Mario Douglas is still there, but he didn't show off too well. But I mean, it was Drake May's first year, so some of those guys come alive. Rumor is out of camp that Javon Baker might not make the team. Polk are struggling a little bit, I think, if I remember right. But then they drafted Trayvon Henderson second round. Really, really like him out of Ohio State. Still Ramondre under contract, I believe, but he might be out the door here in the next few years. But as of right now, he'll still be there. But I think Henderson's the future for sure in that backfield.
Yeah, I think for New England, I think when it comes to the running back room, I think Ramondre needs to first and foremost. I think he needs to take care of some of the fumbling issues.
Yeah, no,
Too many
100%.
times
I
he's
was gonna say that.
he had the league leading 7 fumbles last year, and that's something that New England as an entirety, even when Tom Brady was there, they didn't allow that at all. And then you come in, and Vrabel's not going to be any different than Belichick when it comes to fumbles and lack of accountability, lack of discipline when it comes to being on the field. And I think for the receiver room, it's going to be interesting to see how many receivers do they keep? Do they keep 5? Do they keep 6? Do they keep 7?
Yeah, because Kayshon Bouttie's still there. I didn't mention him. He showed off pretty well at the end of the year.
Kayshon Boutie's there.
He's running with the ones right now in camp, isn't he?
He's running with the 2s and 3s.
He's running with 2s and 3s. So who's running with the ones? Is it Kyle, Stephon, and DeMario?
Correct. So right now, I think the roster locks for sure are Diggs, Douglas, and Kyle. I think those and then I think the other one it could also be Boutte as your roster lock. I think Boutie's made some plays.
Yeah,
he's one of Drake's favorite targets. And you look at that last and final roster spot. I think Mac Hollins is a lock. I think Mac Hollins, he returned to practice this past week, and he's looked very, very good. He's looked very far and away better than some of these other guys on the outside looking in. And I think Mac Hollins is going to be able to make that roster. So at that point, you're looking at cutting Javon Baker. You're looking at cutting Jalen Polk.
That's tough because he drafted him second round last year. It didn't pan out, but
yeah, the only one who has true allegiance to Polk is Elliot Wolf within that front office, and I think Elliot is fine turning over a leaf and saying, okay,
And he didn't show it much at all the first year. So
no, Polk did
under 100 yards in the season.
100 yards.
Yeah, so it's very easy for them to move on from something like that. It's not like he played pretty well. But no, yeah. I think the biggest thing is the offensive line. I think that improved way more than it was last year. And if Drake May has time, I really think can turn out to be one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. I really like him. I really think he can. And he's one of those guys. He's a lot of fun. And if you have him in fantasies and have the rushing upside, bring you a W. But no, him and adding Travion Henderson, Diggs, Kyle Williams, I think is going to add a lot to this offense. Still Hunter Henry there at tight end, who's been productive throughout his years at New England.
Yeah, I think this offense, we got to also remember that this is a Josh McDaniels offense. So the intricacies and the small nuances of an offense is going to be a lot. It's going to take time to develop and take time to grow into. And I think with Drake May, the biggest thing that everyone's going to point to is that he's in McDaniels offense. So it's like, we'll see what Brady did. Let's watch what Brady did. I think McDaniels is a completely different mindset going into this year than he ever had with Brady, because he's got May, he's got all these weapons, and he's got a younger team around him. So I think that with McDaniels, I think you're going to see some of the old stuff, the screens, the play actions, the
which is
dink and
what
dunks, and
Henderson's
then
built for. Like
yeah, and
that's
then you're
why
gonna
Henderson
then you're
fits
gonna
so
also
well.
see some of these other stuff. You're gonna see some of the nuances, the newer stuff, and when it comes to NFL offenses, I think Josh McDaniels took this last year off, intentionally. I don't think he wanted to rush into a job. I think he wanted to, study, what his craft was, and his craft was, being an offense coordinator. So finding the next
Mm-hmm.
job was going to be very important to him.
Did Mayo offer him a job? No, Mayo never offered him a job.
Mayo never offered him the job. No.
I think he kind of wanted to come back to New England, especially when Rabel showed up there. I think too. That's kind of
Vrabel
his
and
guy.
McDaniels have been tight for a long
Yeah.
time. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the story goes that McDaniels was the one who picked up Vrabel from the airport when Vrabel got hired as the Patriots head coach, and like they know each other on and off the the building, and so when it comes to finding those the connectivity within your team, I think it really starts from top to bottom.
No, 100%. If you look at the schedule, they don't actually have a terribly hard schedule. I could. There's a chance I could easily see them getting 8 to 10 wins out of this year. Obviously, we said we don't like to predict wins right away, but just from a standpoint, I don't see them as having the toughest schedule by any means. They're the worst team in the AFC East. They play the bottom feeders of the AFC theoretically on the bottom of the divisions. They got Raiders week 1, home at the Dolphins. Dolphins come home. Steelers come home. Panthers come home. They're at the Bills, at the Saints, at the Titans, versus the Browns, versus the Falcons, at the Bucks, versus the Jets, at the Bengals, versus the Giants, versus the Bills, at the Ravens, at the Jets, versus the Dolphins. This could be a year where they kind of pop off because they have a lot of those teams like the Saints, Titans, Browns, Giants that they play the bottom because they were the bottom last year. So this could be a really big year to kind of show that they mean business at post Tom Brady era a few years ago.
Yeah, I think that New England's going to be able to hold within 6 to 9 wins this year. I think the floor would be 6 wins at a minimum, especially when you have that coaching staff and all that experience, and then you have all these upside players. I think you're going to guarantee yourself around 6 wins, and I think that we're going to only progress further and further. And I think we're looking to build one day at a time and just continue to develop what's in our building. We're going to take it how it comes.
What do you think is the ceiling for the Patriots this year?
I think the ceiling could be winning the division, but especially with Vrabel, I think you could come
Oh,
in and you could win that division. I think that's the highest you could go
yeah.
is win that division
Do you
and
think
get in the
they're Super Bowl
playoffs.
contenders this year? Or just a little step off from that, probably a little bit.
I think they're about 1 to 2 years away. I think that this year is going to be a lot like Detroit's first year when it came
Mm-hmm.
with Dan Campbell, Ben Johnson, when Aaron Glenn, those
Jared
guys are
Goff
going to
got
come.
traded in.
Yeah, I think you're
Yeah.
gonna have a lot of it's time to kind of figure out what you want it to look like and
There's gonna be
build
some bumps in the
further.
road along the way.
Yeah.
No, for real, for real. That's a very good look at it. Very good look at it. Why don't we move on to the Dolphins? Last year, kind of disappointing year, but kind of also a very injury riddled year. Tua got absolutely blasted by Damar. Kind of ruined their whole season. Finished 8-9, third in the division, but it's one of those years that you kind of got to look at and be like, it's what it is. You can't help injuries. I mean, they haven't added a ton. They just traded Giannis. They lose their starting tight end. They signed Darren Waller. They traded for Darren Waller out of retirement. Obviously he's I think 3 years older than Johnny was. Has been off the NFL. He's not even practicing right now. They said he hopes to be ready in about a week. I think.
Yeah.
So that's losing a guy like Johnny had 800 yards, 80 catches, 8 touchdowns last year. 888. Pretty solid last year. Probably his best year. I mean, not probably his best year by far in the pros. So losing him will be kind of a knockdown. But you have Waddle and Tyreek. I mean, you're not too concerned about that passing attack by any means, as long as Tua stays healthy. That's the biggest thing. And they did upgrade the backup quarterback this year, which is I think kind of a big deal. If you throw out a guy, obviously Zach Wilson isn't a QB1 by any means, but if he can be a solid backup, I think that's a lot better than Tyler Huntley or whatever they're rolling out. They're trying to make the playoffs with last year.
I think with the Miami Dolphins, I think the biggest thing is just, how do they want us to take them as a serious franchise when you're doing all these moves, when you're trading away your best weapons on offense and defense when it comes to Johnny and Jalen. I think those were your best weapons,
Did they get
outside
Minka
of
back?
Tyreek.
Did they get Minka back?
You do get Minka back, but you get Minka back like 6 years later after you traded him. So you lose all that prime years with him, and you bring him back to more of a leadership role. And honestly, right now, especially what is happening in practice with the Miami Dolphins, they're losing cornerbacks left and right.
Mm-hmm.
Achilles tears,
I was gonna say
ACLs.
yes.
I mean, these guys.
Artie Burns for his, yeah.
Yeah, so I think just a lot of it comes down to Miami is going to be an interesting team to watch because they are not good when it comes to certain statistics, and you can believe statistics or not when it comes to weather and when it comes to who they play.
But when your record against winning, 10+ wins teams is off, it's not even good. Like it's not even like a freak play here. They're getting blown out by good teams most weeks. On they're one of those teams. It feels like they're high end, middle of the pack.
Yeah,
is that fair to say? Like it's they don't show up versus the good teams. Now is that a Mike McDaniel's issue or is that a?
Yeah, I think that part of it is a Mike McDaniel issue. I think that there are people within the organization, reports are coming out that McDaniel is starting to rub them the wrong way just based on the fact that he did have success in his first year and he was able to win a lot of games and change the culture, or at least the conception of it. And then you come in the next 2 years and you're not having really great seasons and you're still doing the same sort of stuff. You're still saying the same sort of stuff. And it's just like, okay, something needs to change. I do think McDaniels, if he starts the season at a losing record at the midway point, I think he could be on the hot seat when it comes to the end of the year.
Do you think he's on the hot seat right now? If they start off 2-7, is he gone?
I think he's on the hot seat. I don't think they're making that move in the middle of the season. I don't think Chris Greer has ever acted like that before.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see what the ownership and the management decides on McDaniels, but I think that he's going to be safe for this first year.
Yeah, no, that's fair to say. Yeah, Tyreek had a lot of drama over the offseason with posting on X and saying he wants out. But recently, it's looked like he's pretty in tune with camp and he's there and he's participating. And Tua talked about it a little bit. I don't know if you saw it, but he said that relationships need to be built up by Tyreek, and he's doing a good job of that. Do you think if the season goes south, I could see a world where he gets traded midseason if they are not a contender, and he starts complaining and wanting out? Do you think there's a chance that he'll get traded midseason if stuff starts turning bad?
Yeah, I think if you look at it as business side, and I think you got to look into the lens of Chris Greer, and you got to start to figure out, okay, the window of opportunity may be closing here for this regime, for this opportunity, for this specific team, and the players especially. I think you start to look towards the future, and if you can get like a first round, second round, third round pick for Tyreek, I think you got to look into trading him away. I think his contract's also another thing that you got to take in consideration. What does that look like if you do trade him? Are they going to keep his? Are they going to pick up his contract, or do you got to keep it on your books? I think it's going to be an interesting decision when it comes down to it. I think if they do start like 2-7, like you talked about, or if they start with a losing record, or things in Miami's reports are coming out that he doesn't want to be there anymore, I think they look into it. But I don't think Miami's going to ever trade Tyreek away unless they like him, unless they like the offer that they're going to get for him.
It's not going to be we want to get a player off our roster. We want to we're going to get a haul for him.
You're trading a player away with the intention to build for the future.
And the hard thing is he's a player that's going to be tough because he's 31 years old. He's starting to get up there. Last year he showed signs of regression a little bit with the production stuff, with the production profile. But no, I'm not terribly worried about his age factoring into his decisions quite yet though. They drafted Ollie Gordon 6th round out of the running back room of Devon Achane, Jalen Wright, Ollie Gordon. They'll add a little more pounding ground because Achane's not that at all. More of a smaller back. Getting a 6 foot, 250-pound guy like Ollie really helps with that, I think. So I think there's a better run game probably coming up. We'll see how Waller is out of retirement. I don't have too high expectations of him, but obviously they saw something in him that the rest of the NFL kind of didn't see yet at this point with their retirement. Weighing down on that decision.
Yeah, we'll see what Darren Waller ends up to look like. I think that for Miami, I think it was more or less we got to get a replacement for Jonnu now that he's not here. Like, let's go around and start looking at the league. You start looking at the league. Who do you really want? Because there's not even. I don't think there's even 16 teams that have a quality tight end one.
Do you think Kyle Pitts is a tight end one?
No. I think Kyle Pitts has had his chance to prove himself. Like, he's had 4 seasons already, 3 or 4. And I don't think he's progressed at all throughout those 4 seasons. And I don't think it is because of coaching. I think it's just purely based on the fact that he isn't what was advertised, or more or less he wasn't able to translate that onto the NFL football field.
He's definitely not as advertised. I think a lot of us who play fantasy are kind of a little fantasy burnt of him. It feels like every year it's hyped up a lot and it fell a lot. But he's never had under 600 receiving yards as a tight end. So from that profile standpoint, it hasn't been terrible. It's just for the 4th overall pick hype. Take him before Jamar Chase. Take him before some of those guys. That's the biggest burner, I think, of all of it. Because I know there was rumors of them in contact with the Falcons over Kyle Pitts. But that obviously didn't turn out. But yeah, no, I agree with you on that. I think the defense is the main thing that I'm worried about with that team.
Yeah.
Like you said, the cornerbacks they don't have any cornerbacks. Minka's safety, he'll be up there helping out with that department. But Artie Burns tore his ACL or Achilles, I believe. They picked up Jack Jones, which I think is a sneaky good signing. I'm not sure how he lasted this long in the free agent wire. Obviously, there's still some guys in the free agent wire that is more than competent of a starting job if they have to throw in an older guy or something like that. So the season isn't here yet, but no, I agree with you. That defense is probably the biggest concern I have for the Dolphins outside of Tua's injuries.
Yeah.
Their schedule isn't as tough as some of the others, but it's not also. I can see them losing their first couple games. They play at the Colts. We'll talk about them later. Versus the Patriots, that's gonna be a tough game. At the Bills, versus the Jets, at the Panthers, versus the Chargers, at the Browns, at the Falcons, versus the Ravens, versus the Bills, versus the Commanders, versus the Saints, at the Jets, at the Steelers, versus the Bengals, versus the Bucks, at the Patriots. Not a cakewalk, not the most difficult schedule. I think it's gonna be a really big prove it year. Like, no, and yeah, I think too is gonna show. It's. I don't know if he gets replaced if he plays bad, but when is that point where it's like injuries are just too much to handle with him?
I think that's got to come from like the medical staff, and I think you got to actually, fully look at the circumstance. Is it the fact that Tua is performing badly just in general as a quarterback, or is it the physical inabilities to perform at a high level and quarterback? I think, when it comes down to it, I think Tua's going to have the opportunity to lose the job. I mean, it's Tua's job to lose, and whoever's going to come in and take the job is going to be somebody who's available. The saying is, the best ability is availability. So we'll see who, I doubt that Tua is going to let his job go without a fight, and I don't think there's right now concern for his job. I think the more or less concern is, for Miami to put it all together, and I think with Tua, I think the big responsibility is on him.
No, 100% agree with that. While we move to the Jets, our final team for this episode. Obviously the biggest news of the season was the firing of Robert Saleh midseason, hiring Aaron Glenn now. Justin Fields, 2-year, $40 million contract. That's the main tidbits of it. He obviously, like you mentioned earlier, Aaron Glenn brought his buddies over from Detroit to help him with the OC. He brought a lot of coaching staff that had already been with him. So it'll be really interesting to see how that team performs this year. I'm not a huge Fields guy. I really am curious to see with maybe better coaching staff getting out of Chicago. He played at Pittsburgh last year. Did okay. It wasn't amazing, but wasn't terrible by any means. And obviously then he had Mike Tomlin, which I think is a very big, very, very good upgrade over what he had in Chicago. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I am kind of concerned about this team's offensive line. Don't know how good it's gonna be. It's been one of the worst the last 2 years. They did upgrade it a little bit, but that's kind of the main concern for me, I guess, this team. Obviously, a Breece Hall, you Garrett Wilson, 2 weapons, but outside of that, you drafted Mason Taylor second round. Outside of those 3, there's not anybody to really be very excited about, whether it be actually on the NFL field or even fantasy wise. There's just not much to be excited about with this team offensively. Defensively, like you said, they really improved. But I think Garrett Wilson is gonna. I think he's an elite receiver, but I think he's gonna have to take another step up to help Justin Fields here. And they were college teammates. They know each other inside and out, so the chemistry should be there for that duo.
Yeah, I think with New York, I think it's going to come down to just what is the play level of Justin Fields going to look like? Is he going to be able to perform at a high level, or is he going to be able to just be a serviceable quarterback? And then you get to a point in the season is do the New York Jets start to look towards the next year? Do they start looking at the quarterbacks in the next year's class? You got a good class. You got Brock Nussmeier out of LSU. You got
Drew Aller coming out.
Drew Aller.
Possibly Arch, depending how he plays at Texas.
We'll see what Arch's Manning situation is looking like, but I don't think he's going to come out.
I agree with you. I think he's a 2027 prospect for sure. Aller, I think, is the main big name that everybody is really excited about, or Nussmeier from LSU for sure. I could see a world where this season goes south really fast, especially if the Patriots play really well. If the Dolphins stay healthy, I could see him going 0-6 in the division. I think that if Justin Fields plays poorly, I think this is his last like guaranteed starter job. I think if not, he'll start off as a backup. Yeah, he'll have games where he'll show why he can be a starter. But I think might be his last real chance to prove he can be a year in year out starter of the NFL. What do you think of that?
I think Justin Fields is going to have whatever opportunities his agent's going to be able to get him. I think, depending on the situation, I could totally see him going to a team that needs a quarterback in the moment, and they know that Justin Fields, depending on how he plays this year, they know that he's a quality quarterback. He's going to be able to get you a couple wins here and there, but he's also going to show you why he shouldn't be the NFL starting quarterback, and he's going to show you some, gaps within the schemes and within, just his, readiness when it comes to, playing on the field on Sunday.
No, right. No, for sure, for sure. I definitely hear what you're saying. It'll be interesting. That's kind of the main storyline with the Jets is if Fields plays well, they'll win a few games. If he doesn't, then this could turn out to be a very bad year for the Jets. And like I just hope they give Aaron Glenn time. Like, don't pull this, bull crap with first year firings. Like, he's gonna need time. Like Dan Campbell needed time, and Troy, because I don't think the Jets are like a loaded roster by any means.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at Dan Campbell his first year, I mean, they went like 0-11 to start the season, I believe,
Yeah,
and they didn't get their first win until it was against the Vikings in like week 12, and they were, trying to like they almost lost that game. It came down to like a last, 2-minute drill when it
yes, sir.
comes down to it, and I think Dan Campbell got the benefit when he was able to get his team to rally, and then ultimately the next year he just wasn't able to get them to the playoffs. They were right in the mix of it, but they were just like a game short, and it just came down to they were to go into Lambeau that last week, and they were able to show us why the Packers aren't really that good anymore. And
Oh my
just be able to
goodness.
show us that the Packers just don't have it anymore. They haven't had it in a while.
That was when
Matt
Rodgers last
LaFleur
year.
isn't the coach we all think he is, and I think
No,
LaFleur
whoa,
is one of the
okay.
most overrated coaches in the NFL.
We can talk about the NFC North another day when we're actually on them, but that's a crazy hot take. That's actually crazy. But no, yeah, but no, I definitely hear you with the Aaron Glenn side of it.
Yeah, I think that
He's
just
gonna need
overall,
time, but
just when it comes down to it, it does come down to like some of the coaching aspect. And when you look around the league, I think Campbell did a really good job with Detroit. I think O'Connell has done a phenomenal job with the Vikings. I think the Vikings are one of the best teams in the NFC North specifically. I think O'Connell and Johnson are going to be able to battle it out. 2 times a week, they're going to be able to hold that, and then Dan Campbell's going to be kind of the mentor to like Johnson, and then
that's crazy
also
that
the
you
up
think
and coming
LaFleur is
kind of guy.
overrated.
I think LaFleur is the fourth best coach in that division.
That's actually like for right now. Like I can there. It's a loaded division, coach, but like putting in Ben Johnson, who hasn't even like saw the NFL as a head coach over him right now at least is it's gutsy, but hey, it's a hot take for sure. No, I think LaFleur is personally one of the best coaches. I mean, you can call me biased if you want, but he's taken Jordan Love from where he was to what he did with him with a winning season the last 2 years. Pretty impressive. But no, back to the Jets. It's I don't expect them. I would be shocked if they got to 8-9 wins personally. But that's just it'll depend on how the season goes for sure. But there'll be a team that could be a dumpster fire, or they could turn out to be like, hey, we're improved a lot. We're going next year, improving our roster instead of rebuilding.
Yeah, I think the Packers are going to be one of the bottom teams in the
You mean
NFL.
the Jets?
Oh yeah, the Jets. The Jets are going to be probably one of the middle of the pack. I feel like I don't think they're going to stoop down to like the lowest of the levels unless they start off on a bad foot. I think that they have the ability to be middle of the pack and pick around that 15th, 16th spot in the NFL draft.
Oh, that high. Okay. What's the ceiling for them though? Do you think?
I think the ceiling for them is 10 wins. I think they're
10
going to be
wins.
able to win, depending on how the schedule shakes out for them. I think they have a shot, winning some games here and there and, coming out with a respectable, record.
I don't. Do you think the playoffs are in that? I don't. Just
No.
how stacked the AFC is. I don't.
Not at all.
I don't see the playoffs
not at
being an
all.
option.
They're not going to be able to make it to the playoffs this year specifically.
No, 100% agree. Yeah, that's kind of the main part of it. I think I would be shocked, but I've seen some. I think I've seen one of them as linked to maybe Terry McLaurin asking for a trade request. I think I've seen the Jets being one of those options. I think it's mainly people just fantasizing about having an Ohio State quarterback and 2 Ohio State receivers more than actual facts. Because I just can't see them spending the capital on a guy like that when they're not really a contender. But
for sure.
Whereas the Patriots, I think, could actually be a team to maybe look at Terry McLaurin.
Yeah, they have a shot at Terry McLaurin and Micah Parsons. So.
Yeah, and especially those two for sure. And I think honestly, the Bills also have a shot. Terry, kind of bringing it back to the AFC East right there. It's like I think the AFC East has a lot of teams that could use another wide receiver, and with Terry on the market again, I feel like those three could all be low key like calling the Commanders and seeing what's up.
Yeah, we'll see what the trade situation looks like with those guys, and we'll see kind of where they're at when Week 1 ends up rolling around.
Yeah, no, for sure. We're recording this the Thursday, the 5th, I believe. 7th, sorry, 7th. And so we're excited for preseason this week. We'll see what happens. Hopefully, I'll have another podcast out later on. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Drop a follow. See you next time.